With 2 kids under 5 and a mortgage that seems to sprout new fees every month, you realize love doesn't always cover the bills. I'm Jordy, 35, married, and working as a personal trainer in a small gym. I love my job, but let's be honest, it's not exactly making me rich. Most months, after the rent, groceries, and the odd emergency, there's not much left. I want more for my family, more breathing room, more options, maybe even a little adventure. I don't want to miss out on my kids growing up. I want to be present, not stuck at the gym for a second shift or hustling every weekend. But I also want to give them things. Swimming lessons, a trip to the zoo, a backyard that isn't just patchy grass and old toys. That's why I'm here, talking to you, trying to figure out if there's a way to make a little extra money online without losing my mind or my evenings. I'm not a business guy. I didn't study marketing. I've never built a website. My only online business experience is selling a used treadmill on Facebook Marketplace and getting ghosted by 3 different buyers. But I keep seeing these stories. People making money online, side hustles that turn into something real. Part of me thinks it's all hype, but another part can't help but wonder, what if it's not? So here's the deal I made with myself. I'll try a new online business model every couple of months, 60 days per experiment. I get $200 to spend, no more, and I can only put in the time I'd usually waste scrolling on my phone or zoning out in front of the TV. That's about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours a day, 10 to 15 hours a week. No cheating, no quitting my job. If it works, great. If it doesn't, at least I'll have tried. I want to be honest about this. I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm not starting with some secret advantage or a bunch of connections. I'm just a regular guy, searching for free advice on YouTube and Reddit, trying to piece things together. I'll share the wins, but I'll also share the failures, the embarrassing, confusing, why did I even try moments? Because I know I'm not the only one who feels stuck, or who wishes they could change things for their family. This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about seeing if there's a way, any way, to build something small that might grow. To maybe buy a little more time with my kids. To stop worrying so much about money. To show my kids that you don't have to settle, even if you're not sure what you're doing. Let me tell you a little about my life, just so you know where I'm coming from. My days start early, usually with a tiny hand poking me in the face, or sometimes a foot. My daughter is 3 and wakes up like a tornado. My son is 5 and has more questions before breakfast than I have answers for all day. My wife, bless her, is the glue that holds us together. She works part-time at a local shop and somehow manages to keep everyone fed, clothed, and mostly sane. After the morning chaos, I head to the gym. I like my job. I get to help people, see them hit their goals. But it's a grind. The pay is steady, but not spectacular. There's no bonus for changing someone's life, no hazard pay for cleaning up after a protein shake explosion. And there's always that nagging feeling. What if something goes wrong? What if the gym closes? What if I get injured and can't work for a month? There's no safety net. We're not struggling, but we're not thriving either. I want to be able to say yes more often. Yes to pizza night, yes to a weekend away, yes to new shoes before the old ones are falling apart. I want to stop that little voice in my head that says, can we really afford this? Every time something fun comes up. So I started looking for answers. Not the make $10,000 a month in your sleep kind. I wanted something real, something a regular person could actually try. I set some ground rules for myself. No scams, no get-rich-quick schemes, nothing that would make me feel like I needed to shower after. Just honest work, online, in the hours I'd otherwise waste. That's how this idea was born. 60 days, $200, 1.5 to 2 hours a day. Just the time I'd normally spend scrolling Instagram or watching reruns of shows I've already seen. I'd pick a business model, jump in with both feet and see what happens. If it works, amazing. If it doesn't, at least I'll have learned something. Maybe I'll even inspire someone else to give it a shot. I want to take you along for the ride. I'll share everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll tell you when I mess up, and I will. I'll celebrate the wins no matter how small. I'll show you the real numbers, the real work, the real stress. Because if I can do this, maybe you can too. Or at least you'll get a laugh out of watching me try. I'm not chasing millions. I'm chasing options, freedom, the chance to say yes a little more often, to show my kids that you don't have to be perfect to try something new. That sometimes, the best thing you can do is just start, even if you have no clue what you're doing. So, here we go. The first 60-day challenge. I'm nervous, excited, and honestly, a little scared. But I'm in. For my family, for myself, for the chance that maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something new. Picking a business model felt a bit like standing in front of a buffet with a blindfold on. There's so much out there. Affiliate marketing, print on demand, online courses, flipping stuff on eBay, even something called Amazon FBA that sounded like either a secret society or a tax form. I didn't know where to start, so I did what any self-respecting, clueless beginner does. I Googled how to make money online with no experience. The results? Overwhelming. Everyone's an expert. Everyone's got a course. Everyone's promising passive income if I just take action and believe in myself. I rolled my eyes so hard I almost sprained something. But then I started noticing a pattern. Dropshipping kept coming up. It was everywhere. YouTube, Reddit, blog posts with clickbait titles like How I Made $10,000 in My First Month with Dropshipping, and How You Can Too. At first I was skeptical. It sounded too easy. You sell products you don't actually have, someone else ships them, and you pocket the difference. No inventory, no warehouse, no shipping boxes piling up in the hallway. Honestly, it sounded like a scam. But the more I read, the more I realized it's a real thing. Big companies do it. Small hustlers do it. Some people make it work. Most apparently don't. Still, something about it appealed to me. Maybe it was the idea of starting with almost nothing. Or maybe it was just the fact that I wouldn't have to fill my garage with unsold yoga mats. I could try it with a small budget, and if it flopped, at least I wouldn't be stuck with 1,000 novelty mugs that say, "World's okayest dad." Plus, it felt like a crash course in online business. If I could figure this out, maybe I could figure out other stuff too. I watched a dozen YouTube videos, some slick, some so low budget I could hear the creator's mom doing dishes in the background. I read Reddit threads where people posted screenshots of their first sale, and others where people warned, "Don't do it, it's dead." I started making a list of pros and cons. Pros: low startup cost, no inventory, lots of free information online. Cons: competition, shipping times, customer complaints, and the constant fear of picking a dud product. I asked my wife what she thought. She shrugged and said, "As long as you don't spend more than the budget and you don't end up on some watch list, go for it." That was all the encouragement I needed. I'd try to be smart about it. No buying expensive courses, no fancy tools unless they were free or dirt cheap. I'd learn everything I could from free resources, and I'd document every step, every mistake, every tiny win. The first step was figuring out what dropshipping actually looks like for a total beginner. I had this vision of myself running a slick online store, orders flying in, money rolling into my bank account while I sipped coffee in my pajamas. Reality check. I didn't even know how to set up a website. I barely knew what Shopify was, except that it sounded expensive. I didn't know how to find suppliers, or what made a good product, or how to get people to visit my store. But I was determined to figure it out. I started by making a list of questions. What platform should I use? How do I pick a product? Where do I find suppliers? How do I make my store look legit? How do I get people to actually buy something? The list got long, fast. I felt overwhelmed, but also weirdly excited. It was like starting a new workout routine. Confusing, a little scary, but full of possibility. I promised myself I wouldn't get stuck in research mode forever. I'd give myself a week, tops, to figure out the basics, then I'd jump in and start building. No more analysis paralysis. If I waited until I knew everything, I'd never start. The next few evenings after the kids were in bed and the dishes were mostly done, I dove into the world of dropshipping. I watched tutorials on how to set up a Shopify store, how to use free themes, how to connect to suppliers using apps like Oberlo and DSers. I learned about product research, how to spot trends, how to avoid products everyone else was selling, how to check if something was already saturated. I started to get a sense of the landscape. Dropshipping wasn't easy, but it was doable. The hardest part, everyone seemed to agree, was picking the right product. Some people spent weeks on this step. I didn't have weeks. I had 60 days and the clock was already ticking. I also started to see the other side. The people who said dropshipping was dead, that it was a race to the bottom, that you'd end up with angry customers and a PayPal account frozen for fraud. I tried not to let it get to me. I figured if I could just get one sale, just one, I'd call that a win. I set up a notebook, an actual physical notebook, because I'm old school like that. I wrote down every question, every resource, every little aha moment. It helped keep me focused. It also made me feel like I was actually doing something, not just dreaming about it. By the end of the week, I had a plan. I'd use Shopify's free trial, keep my store as simple as possible, and focus on finding one product I actually believed in. I'd use only free or super cheap tools. I'd spend most of my budget on getting a few visitors to my store, because what's the point of a beautiful shop if nobody ever walks in? I was nervous. I was excited. I was pretty sure I was going to mess up. But I was in. Dropshipping, here I come. The $200 budget. It sounded like a lot when I first said it out loud. $200, enough for a decent dinner out, a month of groceries if you buy a lot of pasta, or apparently the launch pad for my first online business. But as soon as I started mapping out what I'd need for this dropshipping experiment, I realized how quickly that number shrinks. I sat down at the kitchen table with my notebook and a calculator. My wife looked over my shoulder, half curious, half amused. "You're really doing this, huh?" she said. I nodded, trying to look confident. Inside, I was already sweating the numbers. First, the platform. Shopify seemed like the go-to. Everyone online recommended it, and it had a free trial. Great. But after that, it was $39 a month. That's nearly a quarter of my budget gone before I'd even picked a product. There were other options. WooCommerce, but I'd need hosting. Big Cartel. Free for 5 products but limited features. And some platforms I'd never heard of. I spent an hour reading comparison articles and watching YouTube reviews filmed in bedrooms with unmade beds in the background. In the end, I stuck with Shopify. It seemed the easiest for a total beginner, and I figured the free trial would buy me some time. Then came the apps. This was where the free part of dropshipping started to feel like a joke. Every YouTube guru had a list of must-have apps: product importers, upsell tools, email marketing, review widgets. Most had free versions, but the good stuff was locked behind paywalls. I made a rule. If it wasn't free or dirt cheap, I'd skip it. I signed up for Oberlo, which was free at the time, and a basic email capture app. Total so far, $0 for apps, but I knew that could change if I wanted to get fancy. Marketing. This was the big unknown. Every video said, "You have to spend money to make money." Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, Google Shopping, none of it was free. I started to panic a little. If I blew my budget on ads and nobody bought anything, I'd be out $200 and have nothing to show for it except a sad, empty store. I decided I'd try to get as much free traffic as possible. Reddit, Facebook groups, maybe even TikTok if I could figure it out. But I set aside $100 just in case. Half my budget, gone in the blink of an eye. Product samples. This one stung. Everyone said, order a sample before you sell it. But samples weren't free, and shipping from China could take weeks. I debated skipping this step, but I kept picturing some poor customer getting a broken gadget and leaving a 1-star review. I compromised. If I could find a supplier with good reviews and lots of orders, I'd trust them for now and order a sample if I made a sale. Graphics and branding. I have the artistic skills of a potato, so I looked for free logo makers and Canva templates. I spent an evening playing with fonts and colors, trying to make something that didn't look like it was designed by a toddler. It wasn't great, but it was good enough. I reminded myself, done is better than perfect. I wrote everything down in my notebook, adding up the costs as I went. Adding everything left me with about $59 for surprises, mistakes, or maybe a celebratory pizza if I actually made a sale. I felt both relieved and a little queasy. The margin for error was razor thin. If I messed up, there was no backup fund, no just this once splurges. Every dollar had to count. This was the first time I really felt the weight of the challenge. It's easy to dream when you're watching other people's YouTube highlight reels. It's harder when you're staring at a spreadsheet, realizing that one wrong move could sink the whole experiment. I started to second-guess myself. Was $200 enough? Was I being naive? Should I have saved up more before starting? But then I remembered why I set the limit in the first place. I wanted this to be real. I wanted to prove, to myself, to anyone watching, that you don't need a ton of money to start. That you can build something with what you have, even if what you have isn't much. Besides, if I could make this work on a shoestring, imagine what I could do with more. I decided to treat the budget like a workout. You don't get stronger by lifting what's easy. You get stronger by pushing against what's hard. This was my resistance, the constraint that would force me to be creative, resourceful, maybe even a little scrappy. I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't spend a penny over $200. If something absolutely had to be paid for, I'd find a way to cut somewhere else. If I ran out of money, I'd have to get creative. No credit cards, no borrowing from next month's paycheck. Just the cash I set aside in an envelope, sitting in my desk drawer, waiting for its moment. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and a cup of tea. I looked over my budget, my plan, my list of fears. I took a deep breath and wrote at the top of a new page, Day 1, $200. Underneath, I wrote, let's see how far this goes. The first real action step, picking a product. I thought this would be the fun part. You know, scrolling through cool gadgets, imagining myself as the next big thing in e-commerce. Turns out, it's a lot less like window shopping and a lot more like trying to find a needle in a haystack, if the haystack was on fire and the needle kept moving. I started where everyone online said to start, product research. I typed Best Dropshipping Products 2025 into Google and immediately got hit with a tidal wave of advice. Some people said go for trending gadgets. Others swore by evergreen products like pet supplies or kitchen tools. A few insisted the only way to win was to find a weird, untapped niche, like glow-in-the-dark shoelaces for left-handed marathon runners. I was already overwhelmed, and I hadn't even opened AliExpress yet. I made a list of criteria based on what I'd pieced together from hours of YouTube and Reddit. Lightweight, cheap shipping, not easily breakable, no glass, no electronics. Not something you can buy at the local store. Under $30 retail, so people might impulse buy. Enough of a wow factor to make someone stop scrolling. The list looked good on paper. In practice, it was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. I spent hours on AliExpress, scrolling through endless pages of phone cases, kitchen gadgets, pet toys, and things I couldn't even identify. At one point, I found myself seriously considering a banana slicer shaped like a banana. I laughed out loud. Who needs a banana-shaped banana slicer? Apparently, enough people that it had thousands of orders and hundreds of reviews. I started to get a little desperate. Every product I liked seemed to already have a million sellers. Every untapped gem looked like it would be a nightmare to explain to a customer when it inevitably broke or arrived late. I tried using free tools like Oberlo's Product Explorer and even signed up for a free trial of a paid research app, but the good stuff was always locked behind a paywall. I made notes in my trusty notebook. Pet hair remover roller. Lots of orders, but so many sellers. LED bike lights. Cool, but shipping times are brutal. Reusable food storage bags. Maybe too generic? I started to see why so many people quit at this stage. It's easy to get stuck in research mode, convinced that the perfect product is just one more search away. But I only had 60 days, and the clock was ticking. I gave myself a deadline. By the end of the week, I had to pick something. No more second guessing. One night, after the kids were finally asleep and my wife was catching up on her shows, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, determined to make a decision. I scrolled past the usual suspects, phone cases, water bottles, novelty socks. Then I stumbled on something that made me pause. A portable mini blender. It was small, rechargeable, and had a bunch of 5-star reviews. The videos showed people tossing in fruit, pressing a button, and making smoothies on the go. It ticked most of my boxes. Lightweight, not too expensive, a little bit of a wow factor. Plus, as a personal trainer, I could actually see the appeal. I did a quick search to see how many other stores were selling it. The answer, a lot. But I noticed something else. Most of the stores looked generic, with stock photos and bland descriptions. I started to think, maybe I could do it better. Maybe I could make it feel a little more personal, a little more trustworthy. I wrote mini blender at the top of a new page in my notebook and started jotting down ideas. How could I position it? Who would buy it? Busy moms, college students, gym goers, people like me who wanted something quick and easy. I scribbled down some potential angles. Smoothies on the go, no excuses. Healthy eating, anywhere, anytime. Perfect for busy parents and fitness lovers. I started to get excited. For the first time, it felt real. I could picture the store, the product photos, the copy. I could imagine someone actually buying it, using it, maybe even sending me a thank you email. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Nothing about this process had been easy so far, but I felt like I'd finally found my starting point. The next step was finding a supplier. I messaged a few sellers on AliExpress, asking about shipping times, bulk discounts, and product quality. Most didn't reply. One sent a message that looked like it was copied and pasted by a robot. But one seller actually answered my questions, sent me a video of the blender in action, and offered a small discount if I ordered more than 5. I made a note. Potential supplier. Friendly. Responsive. I decided to take a leap of faith. I'd list the mini blender as my first product. If it bombed, I'd learn something. If it worked, maybe I'd have the start of a real business. I sketched out a rough plan. Build a simple, clean store focused on the blender. Use my own words and photos, if I could get a sample. Target people like me, busy, health-conscious, short on time. I closed my laptop feeling a mix of relief and terror. I'd picked my product. No turning back now. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, my wife poked her head into the bathroom. "Did you pick something?" she asked. I nodded, toothbrush hanging out of my mouth. "A blender," I mumbled. She laughed. "Of course, just don't try to sell me one." I grinned. No promises. Building the store was where the rubber met the road. All the research, the late-night YouTube binges, the scribbled notes in my battered notebook. None of it mattered if I couldn't actually get a website up and running. I sat down one evening, mug of lukewarm tea in hand, and stared at the blinking cursor on Shopify's sign-up page. It felt like I was about to climb a mountain in flip-flops. I'd never built a website before. I'd barely even customized my Facebook profile. But Shopify promised it was easy, and I clung to that word like a life raft. I signed up for the free trial, picked a basic theme, and was immediately hit with a dashboard full of buttons, tabs, and settings I didn't understand. My first instinct was to close the laptop and pretend this was all a bad dream. But I remembered my promise. No quitting, no matter how lost I felt. The first hurdle was choosing a name. I wanted something catchy, memorable, and not already taken. After half an hour of typing random words into the domain search bar and getting rejected every time, I settled on something simple and slightly cheesy. Blend Buddy. It wasn't going to win any branding awards, but it was available, and more importantly, it was mine. I bought the domain for $2 and did a little fist pump. Small win. Setting up the actual store was a comedy of errors. I'd watch a tutorial, pause it, try to copy what they did, and then realize I was on the wrong page or had clicked the wrong button. At one point, I accidentally deleted my entire homepage and had to start over. I cursed, laughed, and kept going. The learning curve was steep, but every little victory, adding a product, tweaking the colors, figuring out how to change the font, felt huge. Uploading the product was its own adventure. Shopify wanted photos, descriptions, prices, shipping info, and about a dozen other things I hadn't even thought about. I didn't have my own photos yet, so I used the supplier's images, cropping and editing them in Canva to make them look a little less generic. I wrote a product description that sounded like something I'd actually say to a client at the gym. Make healthy smoothies anywhere, anytime. No excuses. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. I spent way too long agonizing over the price. Too high, and nobody would buy it. Too low, and I'd make pennies. I settled on a price that gave me a small margin after shipping and fees, hoping it was enough to cover mistakes. I added a few trust badges I found for free online. Things like secure checkout and money-back guarantee, even though I wasn't totally sure how to actually process a refund yet. Fake it till you make it, right? The legal stuff nearly broke me. Privacy policy, terms and conditions, refund policy, I had no idea what any of it meant. I found some free templates, tweaked them to fit my store, and hoped I wasn't accidentally promising to send everyone a free blender for life. I made a mental note to actually read them later, just in case. Customizing the theme was another rabbit hole. I wanted the store to look clean and trustworthy, but every time I changed one thing, something else broke. The header disappeared, the footer turned bright pink, the product page looked like it had been designed in 1998. I spent hours fixing tiny details nobody would probably notice. At one point, I realized I'd spent 20 minutes trying to pick the perfect shade of green for the Buy Now button. I laughed at myself, closed my eyes, and picked the one that looked the least like a traffic light. By the end of the first week, the store was technically live. It wasn't beautiful, but it worked. I could add products, take payments, and, in theory, ship orders. I showed it to my wife, half expecting her to laugh. Instead, she smiled and said, "It looks real, like an actual store." That meant more to me than she probably realized. But the truth was, I was exhausted. I'd spent every spare minute hunched over my laptop, Googling solutions, watching tutorials, and fixing mistakes. The kids would wander in and ask what I was doing. Building a store, I'd say. My son wanted to know if he could sell his drawings on it. My daughter asked if we could buy cookies from my store. I told them maybe someday. There were moments I wanted to quit. When the homepage vanished for the third time, when I couldn't figure out how to connect my payment processor, when the logo looked like clip art from a 1990s school project. But each time I remembered why I was doing this. For my family. For a shot at something better. For the chance to prove to myself that I could build something from scratch, even if I had no idea what I was doing. By the end of the week, I had a functioning, if slightly wonky, online store. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd learned more in a few days than I had in years of scrolling social media. Every mistake was a lesson. Every tiny win felt like a victory. I sat back, looked at my store, and felt a strange mix of pride and terror. It was real now. People could actually visit, browse, and, if I was lucky, buy something. The next challenge was getting them to show up. Supplier roulette. That's what it felt like, spinning a wheel and hoping you didn't land on scam or shipping disaster. I'd picked my product, built my scrappy little store, and now I had to find someone on the other side of the world to actually deliver the blender if anyone bought it. The stakes felt weirdly high for something so ordinary. If my supplier flaked, sent junk, or just disappeared, my whole experiment would crash before it even started. The first thing I did was go back to AliExpress, where I'd found that one seller who actually replied to my messages. I'd asked about shipping times, returns, and whether the blender really worked as well as the videos showed. Their English was a little shaky, but they seemed honest enough. Sent me a video, answered my questions, didn't pressure me to buy in bulk. Compared to the other responses I got, or didn't get, they felt like a safe bet. Still, I had doubts. Every dropshipping guide screamed about the importance of reliable suppliers. Some people recommended using agents, but that sounded expensive and complicated. I was sticking to my $200 budget, so I had to make do with what I could find. I read every review I could, squinting at blurry photos and trying to decipher if fast shipper good meant what I hoped it did. I checked how many orders they'd fulfilled, how long they'd been on the platform, and how they handled complaints. It was like online dating, but instead of looking for love, I was hoping not to get burned. I decided to order a single sample just to see what would happen. It cost about $20 with shipping, more than I wanted to spend, but I figured it was better than selling something I'd never even touched. The seller promised it would arrive in 2 weeks, which sounded optimistic, but I crossed my fingers. Waiting for that package felt like waiting for exam results. Every day, I checked the tracking number, refreshing the page like it might make the blender move faster. While I waited, I kept messaging other sellers, just in case my first choice fell through. Most replies were either copy-pasted or so vague I wondered if they'd even read my questions. One seller tried to upsell me on a premium version of the blender for twice the price. Another sent me a link to a completely different product, a set of silicone baking mats. I started to understand why so many people warned about supplier roulette. It was exhausting, and I hadn't even made a sale yet. The sample finally arrived, 2 days later than promised, but still faster than I expected. I opened the package at the kitchen table, my kids hovering nearby like it was Christmas morning. The blender looked just like the photos, small, lightweight, kind of cute in a futuristic way. I washed it, chopped up a banana, and tried it out. It worked. Not perfectly, it struggled a bit with frozen fruit, but it did the job. I could actually see someone using this on the go, just like the video showed. I felt a surge of relief. At least I wasn't selling total junk. I took some quick photos with my phone, trying to make the blender look as appealing as possible. My kitchen lighting wasn't great, but I figured real photos were better than the generic ones everyone else used. I uploaded them to my store, swapped out the stock images, and updated the description to mention that I'd actually tested the product myself. It wasn't a huge detail, but it made me feel more honest, more connected to what I was selling. There was still a nagging worry in the back of my mind. What if the supplier messed up an order? What if shipping took forever or the product broke in transit? I read horror stories online. People waiting months for their orders, customers demanding refunds, PayPal accounts getting frozen. I made a mental note to keep my communication with the supplier friendly and clear, just in case I needed help down the line. I also realized I needed a backup plan. If my main supplier dropped the ball, I wanted to have someone else I could turn to. I bookmarked a few other sellers with decent reviews, just in case. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best I could do with my limited budget and even more limited experience. The whole process made me appreciate how much trust goes into this kind of business. I was trusting a stranger halfway around the world to deliver on their promises, and my customers, if I ever got any, would be trusting me to do the same. It was a weird feeling. Exciting, but also a little scary. For the first time, I understood why so many people give up before they even launch. It's not just about the money or the time. It's about the uncertainty, the risk, the feeling that you're always one step away from disaster. But I kept going. I had my product, my supplier, and my store. I was ready for the next step, actually getting people to show up. The next mountain to climb was marketing. Now I needed customers, actual, living, breathing people to visit my site and hopefully buy a blender. This was the part that scared me the most. I knew nothing about marketing. If you'd asked me a month ago what a conversion rate was, I'd have guessed it had something to do with soccer. I started with the free stuff. My budget was tight, and I was determined not to blow it all on ads before I even had a single visitor. The internet was full of advice about organic traffic, getting people to your site without paying for it. I read blog posts about SEO, joined Facebook groups for new entrepreneurs, and lurked on Reddit threads where people swapped tips and horror stories. The advice was all over the place. Some said to start a blog, others said to make TikTok videos, and a few insisted that Pinterest was the secret weapon for dropshippers. I felt like I was trying to learn a new language. I decided to start with Instagram. It seemed like a natural fit for a visual product like a blender, and I already had an account, even if I mostly used it to post photos of my kids and the occasional gym selfie. I created a new account for the store, uploaded my best product photos, and started following fitness hashtags. I posted a few times a week, sharing smoothie recipes, quick health tips, and behind-the-scenes shots of me testing the blender in my kitchen. My following grew slowly, painfully slowly. Most days, I got more spam bots than real people, but every new follower felt like a tiny victory. I also tried my hand at Facebook. I joined a handful of groups for health enthusiasts, busy parents, and people looking for quick meal solutions. I didn't want to be that guy who just spams his link everywhere, so I started by joining conversations, answering questions, and sharing tips. When someone asked about portable blenders, I'd chime in with my experience and a link to my store, always trying to sound helpful, not pushy. Sometimes people clicked. Sometimes they didn't. Most of the time, my posts got buried under a flood of other advice. Reddit was a different beast. The dropshipping subreddits were full of people just like me. Beginners, dreamers, and a few grizzled veterans who seemed to know everything. I posted about my journey, asking for advice and sharing my struggles. Some people were supportive, others were brutally honest. One guy told me my store looked like a high school project, which stung, but also made me laugh. I took the feedback, made some tweaks, and kept going. After a couple of weeks, I realized that organic traffic was slow. Really slow. I'd get a handful of visitors a day. Maybe one or two would add something to their cart, but nobody was buying. I started to worry that I'd built a store nobody wanted to visit. I refreshed my analytics page over and over, hoping for a spike that never came. The silence was deafening. That's when I decided to dip my toes into paid ads. I'd set aside $100 for marketing, and now it was time to spend it. I watched hours of YouTube tutorials on Facebook ads, trying to wrap my head around pixels, targeting, and ad copy. It was overwhelming. Every guru had a different strategy, and most of them seemed to assume I had a marketing degree and $1,000 to burn. I started small. I created a simple ad with a photo of the blender, a short caption about making healthy smoothies on the go, and a Shop Now button. I targeted people interested in fitness, healthy eating, and meal prep. I set the budget to $5 a day and held my breath. The first day, nothing happened. The second day, I got a few clicks but no sales. By the end of the week, I'd spent $30 and had exactly 0 orders to show for it. I felt sick. Was I doing something wrong? Was my product just not appealing? Was my store too amateurish? I started to spiral, convinced I'd wasted my money and my time. But then, on the 8th day, I got a notification. "You've made a sale." I stared at my phone, not quite believing it. Someone, somewhere, had actually bought a blender. I did a little victory dance in my kitchen, nearly waking up the kids. It felt like winning the lottery. That one sale changed everything. Suddenly, the hours spent tweaking my ads, posting on social media, and lurking in forums felt worth it. I wasn't just shouting into the void anymore. Someone out there wanted what I was selling. I kept experimenting, tweaking my ads, trying different audiences, and posting more on Instagram and Facebook. Some days were better than others. Some days, nothing happened at all. But I kept going, fueled by that one sale and the hope that there would be more. Marketing was harder than I ever imagined. It was humbling, frustrating, and occasionally exhilarating. But it was also the most important part of the whole experiment. Without customers, I didn't have a business. I just had a website and a blender. By the end of the month, I'd spent most of my marketing budget and made a handful of sales. It wasn't enough to quit my job or even cover the groceries, but it was proof that this could work. I'd learned more about marketing in a few weeks than I had in my entire life. I still had a long way to go, but for the first time, I felt like I was actually building something real. The first sale was like a shot of pure adrenaline. I'd been refreshing my Shopify dashboard so often that the analytics graph was burned into my retinas, but this time, there was a little 1 next to orders. I stared at it for a good 30 seconds, just to make sure it wasn't a glitch. I even closed the tab and reopened it, like maybe the universe would take it back if I celebrated too soon. But there it was, one real person, with a real address, who had actually paid me money for a blender. I wanted to tell everyone, but it was midnight and the house was quiet. My wife was asleep, the kids were finally down, and even the cat was curled up in a corner. So I did a silent fist pump and took a screenshot for my notebook. It felt like proof that I wasn't totally crazy for trying this. The high lasted until the next morning when reality set in. Now I had to actually fulfill the order. I'd practiced the process, but something about doing it for real made my hands sweat. I double-checked the customer's address, messaged my supplier, and paid for the blender to be shipped. I sent a confirmation email, trying to sound professional even though my heart was pounding. I must have read that email 3 times before hitting send. I imagined the customer on the other end, expecting Amazon-level efficiency, and here I was, a guy in sweatpants at his kitchen table, hoping nothing went wrong. Of course, things started going wrong almost immediately. The supplier messaged me a day later. "Sorry, out of pink color. Only blue available. Is okay?" I panicked. The customer had ordered pink. I messaged back, asking how soon pink would be available. No response. I waited a few hours, then messaged again. Still nothing. I started to sweat. Should I email the customer? Wait for the supplier? Cancel the order? My mind raced through every worst-case scenario. Finally, the supplier replied, "Pink in stock next week. Can wait or send blue." I decided to be honest. I emailed the customer, apologized for the delay, and offered them the choice. They replied quickly, much quicker than my supplier, with a simple, "Blue is fine. Thanks for letting me know." I breathed a sigh of relief. Crisis averted, at least for now. But the little hiccups kept coming. The tracking number took days to appear. The estimated delivery date kept shifting. I checked the shipment status every morning, hoping it hadn't gotten lost. I realized how much I'd taken Amazon Prime for granted. Dropshipping was a different world, one where shipping could take weeks, and every order felt like a leap of faith. A few days later, I got my second sale. This time, the order went through smoothly. The supplier had the color in stock, the tracking number showed up quickly, and I started to feel like maybe I was getting the hang of things. But then came the third order, a customer from Canada. I hadn't checked shipping costs for Canada. The supplier's shipping fee was almost as much as the blender itself. My profit margin vanished. I debated canceling the order, but I didn't want to disappoint the customer. I took the hit, updated my shipping settings, and made a note in my notebook. Always check international shipping before enabling. The roller coaster continued. Some days I'd get a sale and feel on top of the world. Other days, nothing. I'd tweak my ads, post more on Instagram, and check my analytics obsessively. Sometimes I'd get a flurry of visitors but no sales. Sometimes someone would add a blender to their cart, only to disappear forever. I started to understand why so many people say e-commerce is an emotional roller coaster. There were moments when I doubted everything. Was my store good enough? Was my product too generic? Was I wasting my time? But every sale, no matter how small, felt like a little spark of hope. I started to recognize names in my order list. Repeat customers, people who left kind reviews, even someone who emailed to say they loved the blender and had recommended it to a friend. Those moments kept me going. But there were also failures. One customer messaged me, furious that their blender hadn't arrived after 3 weeks. I checked the tracking. It was stuck in customs. I apologized, offered a partial refund, and waited. The customer eventually got their blender but left a 2-star review. It stung, but I tried to see it as a learning experience. I updated my shipping estimates, added a note about possible delays, and reminded myself that I couldn't control everything. Another time, a customer claimed their blender arrived broken. I asked for a photo, and sure enough, the base was cracked. I contacted the supplier, who offered to send a replacement. I relayed the message, apologized again, and crossed my fingers. The replacement eventually arrived, and the customer updated their review to 4 stars. Not perfect, but better than a 1-star disaster. Through it all, I kept learning. Every mistake was a lesson. Every success, no matter how small, was a reason to keep pushing. I realized that running a dropshipping store wasn't just about picking a product and building a website. It was about solving problems, staying calm under pressure, and finding ways to make things right when they went wrong. By the end of the month, I'd made a handful of sales, dealt with my first angry customer, and learned more about e-commerce than I ever expected. I wasn't getting rich, but I was getting better. And for the first time, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could actually make this work. If I thought making sales was stressful, nothing prepared me for the wild ride that is customer service. There's this myth you see online, people talking about passive income and how dropshipping is just about setting up a store and watching the money roll in. The reality? It's more like running a tiny, chaotic customer service desk out of your kitchen, with a toddler tugging at your sleeve and a cat walking across your keyboard. The first real taste came with a string of emails that landed in my inbox one Monday morning. The subject lines alone made my stomach drop. Where is my order? Blender not working. Wrong color sent. I took a deep breath and opened the first one. It was from a customer in Texas who'd ordered 2 weeks ago and hadn't received a tracking number. I checked my records and realized the supplier had forgotten to update the tracking info. I scrambled to get the number, then wrote back with an apology and the details. The customer replied, "Thanks for the quick response." And I felt like I'd just diffused a bomb. But it wasn't always that easy. The next email was from someone whose blender had arrived but wouldn't turn on. They were polite, but clearly frustrated. I asked for a video of the issue, then sent it to my supplier. After a day of back and forth, the supplier agreed to send a replacement, but only after I paid for shipping. My profit on that order vanished, but I figured it was worth it to keep the customer happy. I sent them a long, apologetic email and a discount code for their next order. They never used it, but at least they didn't leave a bad review. The weirdest request came from a customer who wanted to return their blender because it didn't match the energy in their kitchen. I read the email 3 times, trying to figure out if it was a joke. It wasn't. They really just didn't like the vibe. I offered a return, but they'd have to pay shipping back to China, which cost nearly as much as the blender itself. They decided to keep it, but not before sending me a photo of the blender next to their toaster with the caption, "See what I mean?" I laughed, saved the photo, and added energy mismatch to my growing list of customer service surprises. Then there were the angry customers. One woman wrote a scathing email after her blender took 4 weeks to arrive. She accused me of running a scam, threatened to report me to PayPal, and demanded a full refund. I felt my face flush as I read her words. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I was just one guy trying to make this work, but I knew that wouldn't help. Instead, I apologized, explained the shipping delays, and offered a partial refund. She eventually calmed down and even sent a follow-up email thanking me for my honesty. But the whole experience left me rattled. I started to realize how much of this business was about communication. Most people just wanted to know they'd been heard. A quick reply, a little empathy, and a clear explanation went a long way. I set up some email templates to save time. One for shipping delays, one for broken items, one for returns. I personalized each message, but having a starting point helped me stay organized and sane. Still, the stress got to me. There were nights when I'd lie in bed, replaying angry emails in my head, wondering if I was cut out for this. I worried about bad reviews, about losing money, about letting people down. My wife noticed me getting quieter, more distracted. One evening, she sat me down and reminded me why I started this in the first place. Not to be perfect, but to try, to learn, to show our kids that it's okay to make mistakes. That conversation helped. I started to see customer service not as a burden, but as a chance to get better. Every complaint was a chance to improve. Every happy customer was a little win. I started keeping track of the good feedback too. People who loved the blender, who sent photos of their smoothies, who recommended my store to friends. Those messages reminded me that I was making a difference, even if it was just in a small way. I also learned to set boundaries. I stopped checking my email every 5 minutes. I set aside time each evening to handle customer issues, then closed my laptop and focused on my family. It wasn't always easy, but it helped me keep my sanity. By the end of the second month, I'd seen it all: lost packages, broken blenders, color mix-ups, and even a customer who tried to return a blender they'd clearly used to blend something that wasn't food. I still don't know what it was, but the photos were memorable. Through it all, I kept going. I learned to apologize, to fix mistakes, and to celebrate the wins, no matter how small. Customer service wasn't glamorous, it wasn't passive, but it was real. And in a weird way, it made the whole experiment feel more meaningful. I wasn't just selling blenders. I was learning how to run a business, one email at a time. Balancing this side hustle with the rest of my life was like spinning plates, only the plates were my kids, my marriage, my job, and my sanity. I'd started this whole dropshipping experiment with the idea that I'd just swap out my social media time for business time. That sounded so reasonable in theory. In practice, it meant squeezing every spare minute out of days that already felt packed to the brim. My days still started early, usually with my son bouncing on the bed, asking if it was time for breakfast yet, or my daughter loudly announcing she needed to pee. I'd get everyone fed and dressed, grab a coffee, and head to the gym. My clients noticed I was a little more distracted than usual. I'd catch myself thinking about ad copy while I was supposed to be counting reps, or mentally drafting an email to a supplier during someone's cooldown stretch. I tried to keep it together, but the mental juggling act was real. After work, I'd come home to the beautiful chaos of family life. Dinner, bath time, bedtime stories, the usual parade of spilled milk and negotiations over how many bites of broccoli counted as enough. By the time the kids were finally asleep, I'd collapse onto the couch, tempted to just zone out in front of the TV. But instead, I'd pull out my laptop and dive into the store, checking orders, answering customer emails, tweaking ads, reading yet another blog post about conversion optimization. Some nights, I'd only last half an hour before my eyes started to close. Other nights, I'd get into a groove and lose track of time, only to realize it was nearly midnight and I had to be up in 6 hours. My wife was supportive, but I could tell she missed our old routine. We used to watch shows together or just talk about our day. Now, more often than not, I was glued to my screen, muttering about shipping times or pixel tracking. She'd tease me about my Blender empire, but sometimes I'd catch a hint of worry in her voice. Was this really worth it? Was I burning myself out for nothing? I tried to reassure her, and myself, that it was just for 60 days, an experiment, a way to see what was possible. Some days I felt like I was managing everything just fine. I'd get a good review, make a sale, handle a tricky customer issue, and still have time to play with the kids before bed. On those days, I felt like a superhero. Other days, it all fell apart. I'd forget to send a follow-up email, miss a client's message, snap at the kids because I was stressed about an ad that wasn't converting. The guilt would hit hard. I didn't want to be the dad who was always too busy, or the husband who was always just 5 more minutes away from being present. I started to realize that balance wasn't something you found once and kept forever. It was something you had to keep adjusting day by day, sometimes hour by hour. Some nights, I'd close the laptop early, pour a glass of wine, and just sit with my wife, talking about anything except blenders and ad spend. Other nights, I'd stay up late, chasing that feeling of progress, hoping that one more tweak would make all the difference. I also learned to ask for help. When I was really stuck, I'd post in the dropshipping forums or message someone from a Facebook group. Most people were happy to share advice, and just knowing I wasn't alone made a huge difference. I started blocking out specific times for store work, an hour after the kids went to bed, maybe a little on weekends if things were quiet. I tried to protect family time as much as I could, even if it meant letting a few emails sit unanswered until morning. There were little moments that made it all feel worth it. My son would ask if I'd sold any blenders that day. My daughter would draw a picture of our family, laptop included, and say, "That's Daddy working on his store?" My wife would give me a hug after a tough day and remind me that she was proud of me for trying something new, even if it was hard. I won't pretend I figured it all out. There were still nights when I questioned everything, when the balance tipped too far in one direction or the other. But I kept going, one day at a time, learning to forgive myself for the mistakes and celebrate the little wins. By the end of the 60 days, I was tired, but I was also proud. I'd managed to keep the plates spinning, more or less. I hadn't neglected my family or my job, at least not too badly, and I'd proven to myself that I could carve out time for something new, even when life was busy and messy and unpredictable. Looking back, I realized that the real challenge wasn't just building a store or making sales. It was learning how to fit this new thing into my life without letting it take over. It was about showing my kids, and myself, that you can chase a dream, even if you have to do it in the margins, between bedtime stories and early morning alarms. 60 days. When I started, it sounded like a lifetime. Now, looking back, it feels like a blur. Late nights, early mornings, and a parade of tiny victories and setbacks that all blur together into one big, messy learning curve. Sitting at the kitchen table with my battered notebook and a cold cup of coffee, I started jotting down the lessons, regrets, and the small wins that kept me going. The first lesson was simple. Nothing about this is truly easy. Every YouTube guru and blog post promised quick results, but the reality was a grind. I spent more time troubleshooting than celebrating. I learned that passive income is a myth, at least at the beginning. There's nothing passive about answering angry emails at midnight or scrambling to fix a broken link on your homepage. It's work. Real, sometimes tedious, always humbling work. I also learned that perfection is the enemy of progress. In the beginning, I wasted hours obsessing over tiny details, logo colors, button shapes, the exact wording of a product description. I thought everything had to be flawless before I could launch. But the truth is, nobody cares as much as you do. Customers want a store that works, a product that arrives, and someone who listens when things go wrong. The rest is just window dressing. Once I started focusing on what mattered, clear communication, honest descriptions, and quick responses, I saw things start to shift. Regrets? Sure, I have a few. I wish I'd spent less time researching and more time doing. I wish I'd set up better systems for tracking orders and handling customer service from the start. There were nights when I let stress get the better of me, snapping at my family or losing sleep over a negative review. Looking back, I realize how much of that was just fear. Fear of failing, fear of looking foolish, fear of letting people down. If I could do it over, I'd remind myself to breathe, to laugh at the mistakes, and to keep moving forward. But there were also wins. Small, sometimes silly, but real. The first sale, of course, was huge. But so was the first positive review. The first time a customer emailed to say they loved their blender. The first time I solved a problem without panicking. Even the setbacks became wins in their own way. Every angry email was a chance to get better at customer service. Every shipping delay taught me to set clearer expectations. Every refund was a reminder that people just want to be heard. One of the biggest surprises was how much I enjoyed the process, even when it was hard. There was something deeply satisfying about building something from scratch, about learning new skills and seeing them pay off. Even if the payoff was just a handful of sales and a little extra cash. I started to see myself differently, not just as a personal trainer or a dad, but as someone who could learn, adapt, and figure things out. I also realized how important the community is. The dropshipping forums, the Facebook groups, the random strangers on Reddit who took the time to answer my questions. They made a huge difference. I wasn't alone, even when it felt like I was. There's a kind of camaraderie among people who are trying, failing, and trying again. I started to pay it forward, answering questions from other beginners, sharing my own stumbles and small wins. It felt good to help, even if I didn't have all the answers. Most of all, I learned that progress isn't always obvious. There were days when it felt like nothing was working, when every step forward was followed by 2 steps back. But looking at my notebook, I could see how far I'd come. I'd gone from knowing nothing about e-commerce to running a real, if tiny, online business. I'd learned how to build a website, run ads, handle customer service, and juggle it all with work and family. I'd made mistakes, but I'd also made progress. That's what kept me going. The sense that I was building something, even if it was just a little side hustle. The knowledge that I could try, fail, and try again. The hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something bigger. As the 60 days came to a close, I felt a mix of relief and pride. I hadn't struck gold, but I hadn't given up either. I'd learned more than I ever expected, and I'd proven to myself that I could do hard things, even if I had to do them one late night at a time. So, it was time to tally everything up. The money, the hours, the lessons, and the honest truth about whether this dropshipping experiment had been worth it. First, the numbers. I flipped through my notes, tracking every dollar spent and every sale made. My total expenses came in just under budget, $198.37. Shopify fees, domain registration, a few bucks for a logo, and the rest on ads and that all-important product sample. I'd managed to stick to my $200 rule, even if it meant doing without some of the fancy apps and tools everyone online seemed to recommend. Revenue was a different story. In 60 days, I made 17 sales. Not exactly viral, but not nothing either. After subtracting the cost of goods, shipping, and the occasional refund or replacement, my profit was, well, let's just say it wasn't enough to quit my job. When I did the final math, I'd made $83.42 in profit. That's less than $1.50 an hour, if you count all the late nights and early mornings I poured into this thing. I'll be honest, part of me was disappointed. I wanted a bigger number, something I could show off. But the other part of me, the part that remembered how clueless and nervous I'd been at the start, felt something else. Pride. I'd built something from scratch, with no experience, no connections, and only the time I usually wasted on my phone. I'd made real sales to real people. I'd solved problems, answered emails, and stuck with it, even when things got tough. The lessons were worth more than the money. I'd learned how to set up a website, how to write product descriptions, how to run ads, badly at first, then slightly less badly, and how to handle customer service. I'd learned to keep going when things got hard, to laugh at my mistakes, and to celebrate the small wins. I'd learned that passive income is a myth, at least at the start, and that building something new always takes more work than you think. I also learned a lot about myself. I learned that I could juggle work, family, and a side hustle, even if it meant sacrificing a little sleep and a lot of Netflix time. I learned that I could ask for help, admit when I was lost, and keep moving forward, one step at a time. I learned that I didn't have to be an expert to start. I just had to start. Looking at my notebook, I saw a story, not just of a business, but of growth. Every page was filled with questions, mistakes, ideas, and little victories. Every scribbled note was proof that I'd tried, that I'd learned, that I'd made progress. So, what's next? I'm not stopping. This was just the first experiment. I'm already researching the next online business model to try. Maybe print on demand, maybe affiliate marketing, maybe something I haven't even heard of yet. The rules will stay the same. 60 days, $200, and the time I'd otherwise waste. I'll keep sharing the journey, the stumbles, the wins, and everything in between. If you've watched or listened this far, thank you. I hope my story shows that you don't need to be an expert or have a ton of money or even know what you're doing to start something new. You just need to be willing to try, to learn, and to keep going. Even when it's messy, even when it's hard, even when the numbers aren't what you hoped. Because sometimes, the biggest win isn't the money you make. It's the person you become along the way. So, if you're thinking about trying your own side hustle, my advice is simple. Start small, start messy, but just start. Don't wait for perfect timing or perfect knowledge. Learn as you go. Ask for help. Laugh at your mistakes. Celebrate the tiny wins. And keep showing up even when it's hard. I'm Jordy, and this was my first 60-day challenge. I'm still just a regular guy, still learning, still hustling for my family. But now I know I can do hard things. And if I can, you can too. And before I go, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you've enjoyed following my journey, please consider subscribing to my channel. Your support means the world to me. It truly motivates me to keep going, and it helps me create more content for you. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being here. On to the next adventure.